The history of humanity is full of great inventions that completely change the way we live. Inventions so important that today they seem obvious, things like the wheel, electricity, or the internet. Technologies that transformed the world and are now part of our everyday lives. But what is really interesting is that history is also full of ideas that at first sounded completely ridiculous. Inventions that seemed so strange that many people believed they were jokes, or ideas too absurd to ever be taken seriously. Some of these ideas look like they came straight out of an old science fiction movie, the kind where scientists build strange machines that nobody understands, or even from a comedy where someone invents something ridiculous and chaos follows. And yet, many of those strange ideas actually worked. And not only worked, they ended up changing the way we live, work, and even the way we entertain ourselves every single day. Today, we are going to look at a few inventions that once seemed completely ridiculous. Simple ideas, curious ideas, and sometimes even slightly silly ones. But ideas that eventually became things millions of people use every day without even thinking about it. During the Great Depression in the United States in the 1930s, life became extremely difficult for millions of people. Money was scarce, jobs disappeared, and buying new things quickly turned into a luxury that very few families could afford. Instead of replacing damaged items, people did something far more practical. They repaired them again and again. If something broke, they tried to fix it. If an object was damaged, they looked for ways to extend its life because at that time, throwing things away was simply not a popular option. It was in this context that a company called 3M, which was experimenting with different types of adhesives and industrial materials, began to notice an interesting problem. People needed a simple, fast, and inexpensive way to repair everyday objects, something easy to use that could hold together a broken package, fix torn paper, or repair small things around the house, without forcing them to replace the item completely. The idea that emerged seemed surprisingly simple, almost too simple to be considered a serious invention. It was basically a thin strip of transparent material, coated with adhesive, something that could easily stick to different surfaces without being complicated to use. Today we know it as transparent adhesive tape, but at the time it was far from obvious that such a small, sticky strip would become something important. In fact, when the product first appeared, many people looked at it with a bit of skepticism, almost as if it were a slightly absurd idea. A sticky piece of plastic? Could that really solve anything? Some even believed the invention was too simple to succeed. However, what seemed like a ridiculous idea had one enormous advantage. It worked. And it worked for many things. It could seal packages, repair documents, fix books, hold lightweight materials together, and solve small household problems in seconds. Over time, people began discovering more and more uses for that simple, transparent tape, and what started as a practical solution during difficult times slowly turned into a universal tool. Today, adhesive tape can be found in offices, schools, homes, workshops, and almost anywhere someone needs to fix something quickly. It is used for packaging, temporary repairs, school projects, crafts, and hundreds of creative solutions that the original inventors probably never imagined. And if we are honest, it has also saved people in some rather awkward situations, from repairing loose notebook pages to temporarily fixing a broken pair of glasses when no better solution is available. Something many people have probably done at least once, even if they never admit it. Sometimes the inventions that change the world are not massive machines or futuristic technologies. Sometimes they are simply small, clever ideas that appear at exactly the moment people need them most. And in this case, everything started with something as simple as a small strip of sticky plastic. In 1945, an American engineer named Percy Spencer was working on something quite serious. Military radar systems, devices designed to detect aircraft during the war using invisible waves traveling through the air, complex and precise technology that had absolutely nothing to do with cooking food. Percy was not trying to invent a kitchen appliance, and he certainly was not planning to revolutionize kitchens around the world. That day, he was simply doing his job, standing in front of a device called a magnetron, a key component of radar systems that produced powerful microwave radiation. While running his tests, Percy noticed something unusual, something small but curious enough to grab his attention. The chocolate bar he had in his pocket had completely melted, which was strange because the room itself was not particularly hot. Most people probably would have ignored the detail, eaten the melted chocolate, and continued with their day. But Percy was an engineer, and engineers tend to have a particular habit. When something strange happens, they want to know why. So he decided to run a small experiment. He placed a few corn kernels near the magnetron to see what would happen, and within seconds, something unexpected occurred. The kernels began heating rapidly and suddenly. Pop! One after another, they started bursting open, creating what was likely the first microwave popcorn in history. That alone was surprising, but Percy did not stop there. Curious about what else might happen, he tried another experiment and placed an egg near the device to observe how it reacted. The result was quick and rather chaotic. The egg began heating from the inside. Pressure built up rapidly, and within seconds it exploded, splattering one of the researchers who had been watching the experiment a little too closely. It was certainly not a cooking recipe, but it was a very clear sign that something interesting was happening. Percy had discovered that microwaves could heat food from the inside, making water molecules vibrate and generate heat incredibly fast. At the time, the idea sounded strange. Heating food using invisible waves seemed more like a laboratory experiment than something you would place in a kitchen, almost like something taken from an old 1950s science fiction movie where scientists build impossible machines. However, the company Percy worked for, Raytheon, recognized the potential and in 1947 released the first commercial microwave oven. Although there was one small detail. The machine was nearly 2 meters tall, weighed over 300 kilograms, and cost a fortune. It was definitely not something you would casually place next to your toaster. But as the years passed, the technology improved, the machines became smaller, cheaper, and far more practical. And eventually they found their way into millions of homes around the world. Today, the microwave oven is one of the most common appliances on the planet, all thanks to a curious engineer, a military radar device, and a simple chocolate bar that happened to melt at exactly the right moment. Today, changing the channel on a television is so simple that we barely think about it. All it takes is pressing a button, and within seconds we are watching something else. Another series, another movie, or probably another video we never planned to watch in the first place. But for many years, the experience was completely different, because the remote control simply did not exist. If someone wanted to change the channel, they had to do something that today sounds almost unimaginable. They had to get up from the couch, and that was not an exaggeration. Early televisions had physical buttons directly on the front of the device, so every time someone wanted to adjust the volume, change the channel, or turn the television off, they had to walk over to the set, turn a dial or press a button, and then walk back to the couch again. It may sound like a small effort, but imagine doing that every few minutes when television channels were limited and programs changed constantly. In the 1950s, an engineer named Eugene Pauly, who worked for the company Zenith, began thinking that there had to be a more comfortable way to control the television from a distance. The idea itself was simple, a small device that would allow people to change the channel without leaving their seats. The first remote control was called the Flashmatic, and it worked in a rather unusual way. It used a kind of light beam device that pointed at sensors located on the corners of the television. So when someone aimed the beam of light at one of those sensors, the television would activate a specific function, such as changing the channel or turning the set off. The system was clever, but it also had a small problem. Sometimes sunlight triggered the sensors by accident. This meant that in some homes, the television would suddenly change channels on its own, almost as if the device had developed a personality. Something that must have confused more than a few viewers sitting in their living rooms. Not long after that, engineers developed a new version of the remote control that used ultrasonic signals, sending high-frequency sounds that the television could interpret as commands. This design solved the sunlight problem and became the foundation for the remote controls that would follow. Over time, the technology evolved even further, moving from ultrasonic systems to the infrared signals used by most modern remotes today, Small devices that now control not only televisions, but also sound systems, media players, air conditioners, and even lighting. However, the cultural impact of the remote control turned out to be much bigger than anyone expected. Because it did not just change the way we use televisions, it changed the way we consume entertainment. Before the remote control, changing the channel required a bit of effort, which meant people tended to watch the same program for longer periods of time. But once the remote control appeared, something new was born. The habit known as channel surfing, the constant jumping between channels while searching for something interesting to watch. In other words, the remote control did not just give us convenience, it also gave us the ability to change our minds in a matter of seconds. All thanks to one very simple idea: not having to get up from the couch. What is fascinating about the history of technology is that many ideas that feel completely normal today were once considered strange, unnecessary, or even ridiculous. Whenever someone proposes something new, the most common reaction is skepticism, because the unknown almost always feels a little absurd at first. But history has shown the same lesson again and again. Some of the simplest ideas end up having the biggest impact. A radar experiment that melted a chocolate bar eventually led to the microwave oven. A small strip of sticky plastic became a universal tool for fixing things, and a tiny device invented to avoid getting up from the couch ended up changing the way we watch television. Sometimes the most important inventions are not the biggest or the most complex ones, but the ones that solve small, everyday problems in clever ways. And who knows, the next invention that changes the world might also sound like a ridiculous idea, at least at the beginning.